Ah, one normal day as a Chelsea fan. Is that really too much to ask for? On the pitch, however, hum jeet gaye. Hello there and welcome back to Venki Ball, your home for analysis, tactical previews and reviews for Chelsea Football Club. If you find this analysis interesting, please slap a like on the video and subscribe to my channel. Being a young creator, this will really help me grow. Chelsea played with 10 men for the whole of the second period but held on to secure a 3-2 victory over Brighton and Hove Albion on Sunday. For the second consecutive week, our captain was sent off for two bookable offences, with Conor Gallagher seeing red right before half time. This was just our second victory in the Premier League at Stamford Bridge this season, and our first league win over the Seagulls in over 3 years. Enzo Fernandez and Levi Colwill scored their first goals for the club, while Facundo Buonanetti and Joao Pedro net for the visitors. Playing against just 10 men for most of the game, Brighton dominated possession and had more than two times the passes that we recorded. However, despite having 18 shots, they were only able to accumulate an expected goals number of 1.14 compared to over 2 for us. So, how were we able to do this? With a man down against a team that possesses such flair and ability up front. Let's start with how we dealt with Brighton's build-up when it was 11v11. Despite all his injury concerns, Roberto De Zerbi started with a 4-2-3-1 formation, with Carlos Baliba and Billy Gilmour being the double pivot, behind Adam Lallana in the number 10 role. Chelsea pressed in a 4-1-4-1 shape. Nicholas Jackson occupied the centre backs, while Conor Gallagher and Enzo Fernandez stayed close to Gilmour and Baliba respectively. Moises Caicedo was initially designated as the man to pick up Lallana. Brighton attempted to counter this by having teenager Jack Hinchelwood, who started at left back, dropping into central areas during build-up. If Raheem Sterling didn't go with him, this often drew Caicedo out. In these cases, Mudryk stayed central to cut off the passing lane to Lallana. If the ball was played out wide to Joel Veltman at right back, and Mudryk followed, Badiashile made sure he stayed close to the Brighton number 10. With Gilmour and Baliba closely marked, the Brighton centre-backs struggled to find passes in between the lines, and often resorted to playing adventurous passes to either Lallana or Evan Ferguson, leading to turnovers in possession. Here, Jean-Paul Van Hecke doesn't have a shot option, and hence plays a low percentage ball to Ferguson, which is cut out by Benoit Badiashile. There were occasions, however, when Lallana found space in between the lines. This happened in the build-up to Brighton's first goal, when Caicedo, Enzo and Gallagher all huddled up around Adingra, but failed to dispossess him. Lallana then found Buonanotte, who was able to find space and curl in an effort past Robert Sanchez. Now, let's take a look at how Chelsea built up. Brighton were aggressive in their press, with Ferguson and Lallana engaging the centre-backs, and Gilmour pushing high to track Caicedo. This meant that the centre-back Igor was deputized with staying touch-tight to Gallagher. Here, Thiago Silva is able to find a pass through the lines to our number 10, who in turn successfully turns Igor. This means that Sterling, Jackson, and Mudryk are all 1 versus 1 against their markers. Of course, we did create quite a few decent openings through counterattacks, with Hinchelwood pushing high up when Brighton built up. There was always an opportunity for us to break down the right hand side. Here, after a turnover in midfield, we see how Sterling has the option to play Jackson through, but the striker is in an offside position. We were, however, able to force multiple corner kicks in the opening period and scored through 2 of them. With 10 men in the second half, we sat back and defended in a 4-4-1 shape, with Enzo now playing alongside Caicedo and not pressing high. With Gallagher no longer on the pitch, Gilmour started finding more space and freedom on the ball and looked to pull the strings. The former Chelsea man has a passing range par excellence, and it was a slightly dangerous ploy letting him delve into his box of tricks. Here, the Scot carries the ball and plays a through ball to Adingra, who is then 1 versus 1 against Disasi. Another example, as Gilmour is allowed time and space to play a ball over the top of our defense. Fortunately for us, however, Brighton weren't able to make the most of these opportunities. Just before the hour mark, De Zerbi went all in, making four substitutions. They were all like for like changes, but the intention was to add more directness and purpose to Brighton's approach play. From our perspective, the third goal, which arrived on 65 minutes, came at the perfect time. A swift counter-attack following a Brighton corner saw us in a 3 versus 2 situation, and Jackson played in Mudryk. James Milner's attempt to thwart the Ukrainian was adjudged to be an infringement, and a penalty was given following a VAR review. There was contact between the two players, but if I'm being honest, I would have been furious if this decision had been given against my club. Soon after Enzo converted the penalty to make it 3-1, Pochettino brought on Ian Martson for Nicholas Jackson. This saw us switch to a 5-3-1 formation, with Martson and Colville playing as the wingbacks, and Disasi, Silva, and Badiashile forming a back three. We weren't shy of allowing Brighton to build in the wide areas and put crosses into the box. Substitute Cole Palmer stuck to his task of doubling up with Matson when Mitoma had the ball, restricting the Japanese winger's attempts to use his dribbling, find space in dangerous areas. Here, we see how every Chelsea player except the centre forward is crowding the penalty box, making it almost impossible for Brighton to find a penetrative pass. The visitors were therefore largely restricted to efforts from outside the box. Badiashile and Silva, in particular, had solid outings and were comfortable dealing with balls both in the air and along the ground. In the end, Brighton did pull one back in the second minute of injury time, but were unable to force an equaliser in the time that remained. Now we come to the player ratings for Chelsea. How did every individual score out of 10? Robert Sanchez. The goalkeeper was solid for most parts, collecting crosses, starting counter-attacks, and being assured at a time when Brighton were looking to bombard our penalty area. He scores a 7. Levi Colville. Playing at left back, the Englishman was largely effective in keeping Buonanotte and later Adingra quiet. He also scored his first goal for Chelsea to make it 2-0 in the first half. He scores an 8. Benoit Badiashile. The Frenchman looks like a solid centre back. He dealt with everything thrown at him with minimum fuss and also provided the assist for Enzo's opener. He also gets an 8. Thiago Silva. At 39 years young, the Brazilian is the oldest centre back to ever play in the Premier League. His supreme reading of the game, though, hasn't deserted him one little bit. After the error last weekend against Newcastle, Silva redeemed himself with a solid performance here. Like his centre back partner, he too scores an 8. Axel Disasi. Playing out of position in the absence of Reece James, the summer signing didn't do much wrong at all. He scores a 7. Moises Caicedo. He didn't have his best game by any stretch, and the Ecuadorian could have easily seen a second yellow card on another day after a series of niggly fouls. Against his former side, Caicedo gets a 6. Enzo Fernandez. The star man in this one. Enzo scored his first two goals for the club and also dictated play in midfield when it was 11 versus 11. The Argentine was the man of the match. Scores a 9. Raheem Sterling. Well, he could have done a lot more with the openings that he had in the first half, but like on so many occasions, the final ball often let him down. He's been one of our most productive players this season, but only scores a 6 here. Conor Gallagher. I have no complaints with Gallagher being dogged, determined, and intent to win the ball back, but his tackle from behind, while already on a booking, was a pretty silly decision. Oh, captain, my captain, you only get a 4. Mikhailo Mudryk. Probably only started the game because Cole Palmer was injured, but the winger looked lively in attack, intelligent in defense, and won the decisive penalty in the second half. Hopefully, the only way is up. He scores a 7. Nicholas Jackson. The centre forward made some good runs and got into promising positions, but the final act, when it comes to scoring a goal, is where he seems to mess things up. The Senegalese scores a 6.